Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Castlevania Rondo of Blood. In the last part we started off the game and got through both stages 1 and 2 as well as saved Maria from stage 2, exploring both stages in their totality in the process. And now we're in alternate stage 2. Worth noting, both stage 2s do kind of represent a bit of a rarity in the game stage design, in that pretty much every other stage has 2 exits that lead to it, but both stage 2s only have the 1 exit because they're at the branch point, period. This stage pretty much entirely takes place on this bridge, and some parts of it will crumble as you go. There's some parts that are already crumbled and have little platforms you need to jump across on. The big thing to worry about is falling, because below this is technically a bottomless pit, and that you fall down another screen and find yourself in the lake water, drowning you instantly. Richter is probably worse for this stage overall due to that, because he just has fewer ways to recover from getting hit specifically. But I do want to actively fall down this specific hole. Thy destination awaits! To find our first hidden exit for this stage. And this is sort of a bonus exit too, because this is actively the one stage in the game that has 3 different exits. Art thou prepared? Admittedly, 2 of the 3 exits actively do lead to the same stage, namely this leads to alternate stage 3 alongside the other alternate exit in this stage, but this is the faster one to do. With that said, it's definitely a scary one to do unless you're playing as Maria, because we're just going through an onslaught of mermen trying to pop out of the water and hit you. Timing some strikes with the whip can do a good bit here, but honestly, I'd recommend just being Maria, ducking, and then just constantly throwing doves out to the left to take care of anything that might get even remotely close to you. In the meanwhile, I want to start briefly touching on something I brought up last time, how most people first played this game. Now, this game was originally released in 1993 for the PC Engine CD add-on, released here in the West as the Turbografx-CD. But the game itself was not released at the time. We didn't see this game outright in the West until the PSP remake alongside with the Virtual Console release happening a few years later. I believe those 2 releases were in 2007 and 2010, respectively. What's notable about this is that when they released the remake, they fleshed out the story and gave it a full script update to keep it more consistent with later entries, and gave it a full English dub. And then they used that same voice cast to not only redub the emulated version of Symphony of the Night found as an unlockable, they went out of their way to add an English voice track to the original game here, more or less using the original's simpler script. That's the main reason I'm playing the version of the game I am and not, say, just emulating the PC Engine release like I would for a lot of other games. Like I brought up last time, I've said for years I'd get to this game eventually, and that's because I've been trying and failing to record the game over most of that time span. It wasn't until earlier this year when I finally bit the bullet and bought the Requiem collection on PS4 that it finally worked out, as otherwise I was always trying to emulate the PSP release to mixed effect. Largely, if memory serves, the issue came down to there was a lot of weird audio issues, audio delay in cutscenes, skipping audio in stages and all that, as well as some other frame drops and all that. And that's not too surprising to me in retrospect, because what I was effectively doing was playing a game on an emulator, emulating another game. And I'm assuming that extra layer of stuff just caused all sorts of desyncs and inaccuracies that just made it not run right. Mind you, that also could have been mid-2010s PPSSPP versions causing issues, and I haven't used that specific emulator in any serious fashion in years, barring maybe the occasional momentary boot to test around something here and again. I think the last thing I did full force on that emulator was Final Fantasy IV The Interlude via the Complete Collection when my friend Anthem and I commentated on that about probably half a decade ago now at this point, so maybe the issues I was having with this game on that emulator have been fixed by now. Maybe it was just a factor of what my PC was like at the time. There's a whole lot of things it could have been. And frankly, cutting out parts of the middleman there just to play the Requiem collection has made things quite a bit smoother. Getting ahead of ourselves, there are still some weird inaccuracies in this release. Specifically, some cutscenes don't go to the correct aspect ratio, and I had to fix that myself. But that was a pretty easy fix, largely. Going back to the game itself, these skeleton soldier enemies here can be surprisingly tricky because the arc they jump at to do their jump slash can be pretty hard to avoid with Richter. With that said, Maria just lets you soldier right through that because of how powerful her doves can be in the right circumstances. With that, we've now reached the first boss here in Stage 2 Prime, or alternate Stage 2, and it might look a little familiar from the arena already. That's because we're going to be fighting the werewolf again. And getting slightly ahead of ourselves here, when we get to the other alternate exit here in alternate stage 2, it's going to once again be a boss against the bone golem we fought last time as well. This is because technically what determines what stage you go to next is the boss you fight, not the route they're on per se. And this is even lampshaded by the stage select screen, where if you look carefully, the next stages you can go to will flash a sprite on them that is based on the boss that takes you to that stage in question. For instance, and you can even see this back in the last video, when we were highlighting stage 1 of the stage select and could see the route that leads to alternate stage 2 here, alternate stage 2 had a sprite based on the serpent on top of it, while stage 2 itself had a boss based on the wyvern on top of it. Because this is a fight against the werewolf, this is technically going to put us back into the main stage line, going into main stage 3 rather than alternate stage 3. But before we move into the stage 3s, we gotta finish up the other path here in alternate stage 2. And this is one that's a bit tricky to find safely, at least. Because to get to the main exit we just did, you have to go all the way across this platform set here, of course. But similarly to the first alternate exit we did with Richter earlier this part, you just need to find the right space to fall down into the screen below where we are right now to find the alternate path, and it's a pretty weird feeling, I won't lie, compared to most of the other exits in the game. I think what it is that while other hidden exits are hidden well, this is one of the few that's hidden well in such a way that it feels like you're putting yourself at risk to find it. Because in most cases, you're doing blind faith jumps. From that little chunk in the middle of the level where you go down the stairs and then head back up to where we are right now, you can maybe get the inclination there might be something to your left or right towards the ferryman or towards the second alternate exit, but it just feels weird. Like, in most cases, you're going to find either those two exits by complete accident, falling into a nearby bottomless pit and either dying in the water or just landing on the platform safely at complete accident. It's just weird. We have a mini-boss here, though, the Great Armor. These guys aren't too threatening in the Metroidvania titles, but here in Rondo, they're rather frightening to go up against, especially as Richter. Their sword has a very wide range and will either be swung downwards in a multi-thrust forward that can close in on you quick, and they can also use it to send shockwaves forward upwards of 4 in a row. They're also really tanky, as you would imagine, based on how many hits they've already taken from me. What is pretty rough about them and other armored foes in the game, though, is that they can be immune to some sub-weapons outright. I think it happens the most with the dagger off the top of my head, but sometimes sub-weapons will just plink off of them if they're lighter ones. I think it's like the dagger, I'm gonna think with the Bible here and again, and the axe. Usually the holy water and the cross boomerang are safe from that happening, but I think even those have instances where they're not exactly great for it. As you can see, they also do pretty heavy damage, so be careful. Thankfully, with the axe in hand, I have a pretty good setup going into the bone golem this time around, so it's not the worst. Meanwhile, I do want to mention another sub-weapon we saw earlier in the part. Namely, for most of the run through alternate stage 2 there as Maria, I had the cat sub-weapon based on the white tiger Baihu from Chinese mythology. That's one of Maria's more common sub-weapons, and not for nothing, it's a pretty useful one. Namely, when you throw it out, it'll run along the ground, making contact and damaging any enemies along the way. If it hits a wall or an enemy, it'll get bounced back, be stunned for a bit, and then go back in, so it can also combo the same enemy over and over again. And it can also, I think, jump over some gaps or ledges, depending if it's a small enough one. It's technically the equivalent to Richter's axe, and while I do prefer the axe, the cat is a pretty safe bet for pretty much most ground-based enemies. Its item crash is also one of the more useful ones for Maria, outside of the dragon, of course. Namely, the cat grows into a proper version of Baihu. Maria jumps on top of it, and then it sweeps across the bottom of the screen, then the middle of the screen, and then the top of the screen in order, effectively wiping out most enemies on screen if they're in the way. This is the item crash for the cross boomerang, by the way, Grand Cross. That looks like it's a screen nuke, but the hitboxes are actively directly tied to the crosses, so if an enemy manages to somehow weave between them, they will not get hit. Pretty costly, but overall one of my favorites in the game, barring the Hydro Storm that the Holy Water has, because that's the actual sort of screen nuke that Richter gains access to. But that said, I don't use Grand Cross specifically too much in this LP, if only because the Cross Boomerang is such a reliable sub-weapon at large. I can just rely on the damage it deals with each use and do probably even more damage to most bosses than Grand Cross would. Also, something you might have noticed me doing thus far that I don't really ever stop doing, I really like backflipping immediately after grabbing the stage clear orb because it makes Richter look like he just gets bonked on the head. You can do a similar thing with Maria's double jump, but it's a little harder to time that specific sprite. With that said, welcome to Stage 3 in the Chapel. This is either known as An Evil Prayer Summons Darkness or the Vengeful King of Bloodshed, depending on if you're playing as Richter or Maria. And similar to how Main Stage 2 had one of my favorite renditions of Vampire Killer in the series, Main Stage 3 here has one of my favorite renditions of Bloody Tears from the franchise. It's just such a good instrumentation of it in general. With that said, this can be one of the more annoying stages in the game along a couple of different vectors. For one thing, I think this actively has one of the hardest to reach alternate exits in the game. Not hard to find, just hard to reach. For another, this stage also really likes bottomless pits in certain sections of it. But also, depending on your tastes, it also gets really spam happy with the Spear Knight enemy we just saw me take care of. What's annoying about them is that their range is pretty high to begin with, but it can be deceptively large whenever they raise their spear above their head and they're about to do a slash forward, as that has a very large hitbox. They can also actively poke their spears through walls or down through ceilings to try and hit you from above. They do make appearances throughout the rest of the game, but they get most of their use in this specific stage off the top of my head. But even then, that pales in comparison to the spam of them that kind of happens in the Super Nintendo port of this game, Dracula X. Mind you, I say Super Nintendo port, Dracula X is more of a Super Nintendo simplification and adaptation of this game rather than an actual port of it. Pretty much every stage design is different. There's a lot of simplifications made visually, musically, and mechanically. It's just kind of a lesser experience, but it is still worth checking out. I actively did an LP of it about 4 years back off the top of my head. If you're curious, I recommend going to check it out. In fact, future me, see if you can remember to actually put a card on screen, because I know YouTube has that feature I basically never use. So this area with the staircase is where the split between the main route and the alternate route for this stage happens, but the weird thing is, technically, the alternate route is just getting to the end of this screen. The main route actively requires you to mess up here, technically. Because up on this next section, we got these platforms here right out of Castlevania 1 that will flip if you jump while you're on top of them or if you land on them. If you just walk across them, you're fine. If you fall through those platforms into the pits, it is not death. Instead, you get sent into another chunk of the stage that leads towards the main exit. Getting the alternate exit, which is what we're going to do here with Richter, requires skillful play on top of one other extra in the next room. Worth noting, if you mess up that other extra coming up, the door at the end of the next room will also take you to the main path boss fight that you would reach by falling through these platforms. Once we get to the end of this screen, we're going to be thrown into a mini-boss, though, hence the free meat they just gave us in case you got your ass kicked on the way here. This is the giant skeleton known in later entries as a Paranthropus. This thing takes a whopping 18 shots to defeat, and it can either just walk towards you with its bone, swing it wildly down, throw it in an arcing motion, and it can also try to do a jumping attack at you like that. This enemy is definitely damaging and dangerous, but you can get some nice little goodies in the fight if you actively hit the bell once or twice. Just be careful because sometimes it'll also spawn in a Fleaman. Upon defeating the Paranthropus, you do get another meat from the bell. This is the other room where things can get tricky when it comes to getting the alternate exit, because this room also has proper bottomless pits that can actively kill you. But you want to make sure you take the axe I just got all the way to the end of the room in order to access the alternate route. All the while you gotta dodge the Spear Knights as well as the ghosts, and it can be a lot to take care of. Something to note, though, that I didn't exactly glean onto in my first playthrough. The giant candles in the foreground do count as actual candles you can whip and get items from. It's mostly hearts, but some of them also hold other sub-weapons, but if you're going for the alternate exit, make sure you keep the axe on you, as it's easy to just completely miss that you dropped it if you're moving on too quickly. As for how the alternate exit's going to work coming up, at the end of this room there's a door with 2 elevators next to it. The door just leads to the main exit boss fight, so don't go through that unless you actually want to go fight that fight in specific. But the elevators, when you jump on one, it'll lower and the other one will rise. The elevator on the right has a notable rock outcropping above it that we want to attack, causing it to fall. Doing so will make that elevator get weighed down so much that the elevator on the left will rise up to the alternate exit. This is why you need the axe in specific, because it's the easiest way for Richter to reach that rock. Off the top of my head, if you're trying to get this alternate exit with Maria, your best option is either the dragon sub-weapon after a double jump, or the very comparatively rare egg sub-weapon that when you throw it down will cause a bunch of birds to get spread out in a burst above where the egg hatched from. I overall find this exit easier to reach with Richter. And as you can tell, I also died to the boss fight here, which is a little embarrassing because this is one of the easiest bosses in the game, honestly. It's just that I was so low on health and drastically misunderestimated something. The boss at the alternate route here in Stage 3 is Dogether, which is pretty much directly a beholder from D&D. This boss floats about the room teleporting occasionally, all the while either shooting a 3-way spread shot from its eye, dropping wildly random fire breath about the arena like the Wyvern did back in Stage 1, or summoning some rocks to orbit around it like a Mega Man shield that will either absorb some hits that you're trying to throw at it, depending on the sub-weapon you're using, or just damage you outright. Upon taking care of the Dogether's health, it'll cast one last spell where it orbits around the arena, and then teleports directly above you and drops downwards. If you just even remotely walk left and right while it's doing so, you'll dodge that pretty easily. Maria can also easily do so by sliding, as we'll see when I show that fight off with her later on in the LP. It's not that complicated a boss, and I honestly have always found it weirdly fun to play, but that might be because I've always just found the little sounds it makes as it moves about kind of funny. Because this boss is tied to alternate routes in either stage it's in, this is going to take us to alternate stage 4, which we'll be tackling, I think, a part or two from now off the top of my head. For right now, it's time for us to head back through stage 3 as Maria and both show off the alternate route you could have fallen into back here on the staircase screen, as well as the main stage boss fight accessed via either the route we're going through or the door next to where the elevators were that led to Dogether. The alternate route we're going to fall into actively starts with a big empty room to accommodate for the various entrances it has in this room, but after that it's a pretty straightforward stage, namely it's a bunch of stairs to climb up and avoid some spear knights and all that jazz. Along the way though, I want to talk about this game's story as listed in the manual, sort of. Because the PC Engine version of this game was not released in the West at the time, we actively don't have an official translation of its manual. Instead, I'm reading a translation of it by Hiroshi Kawai as found on CastlevaniaCrypt.com. Afterwards, I will also read the story as described in the English manual of the PSP remake, just to have a official English rendition of the story in here, so to speak. Starting with the PC Engine translation, Prologue. In the days of old, the people thrived on peace and prosperity. Indeed, fears of unrest were not among their thoughts. Ever present, however, is the underside of tranquility, evil. Evil which spurns prosperity and disdains peace. Gather they did, those who wished to summon the powers of darkness and cleanse the decadence of the world. And with smiling countenance they anxiously awaited the coming of their era. 100 years had passed, and he was resurrected. Able to become bat, wolf, or mist at will, he lived in the night. He drank the blood of young maidens and lived an eternal life. The Lord of Demon Castle, the god of evil, Count Dracula, was reborn. Meanwhile, in the PSP Remakes manual, Prologue. In the halcyon days of yore, overripe with peace and prosperity, not a soul believed that tomorrow could bring anything but more of the tranquil plenty about them. But peace and prosperity always give rise to the wicked, those who would deny mankind comfort and grow bored of peace. A dark congregation of such villains began to gather, plotting to revive an unholy power to destroy the decadent world and begin anew. Their ambitions for the new world to be born grew steadily, mirrored in the leering grins etched upon their faces. A century later, that vile creature was reborn unto the world. Taking the form of bat, wolf, or mist at will, he stalked the land by night, draining young maidens of their blood to feed his own immortality. Thus the malefic Count Dracula, Lord of Castlevania, came to live again. It is interesting how much that is pretty much one-to-one with the original manual script when translated into English, but it also really showcases how they gussied up the dialogue of the remake to be a lot more, I'm not gonna say ye olde English, but like Shakespearean, I guess is the way I want to put it. Also, I've never quite understood this. The level design here is built in such a way that Maria can slide over here and kill these spear knights directly to get points from them. But I think that's the only reason you'd want to go down there in this version of the game. I think the remake adds a collectible to grab over here, but I don't quite recall. Also, a weird little detail about this route that's kind of neat at the same time. There's mods that'll follow you as you destroy lamps. It's just a nice little detail they didn't need to do, but they did anyway. So, the main stage boss for the stage 3s, I'd say, is definitely the harder of the two, especially when it comes to dodging their pinch attack. This is also one of the key boss fights in the game that showcase how much more movement utility Maria has over Richter, as there's two specific attacks this boss has that are possible to dodge with Richter, but just so much tighter to get around, be it you jumping over them or walking underneath them, whatever the attack might be. The main boss for the stage 3s is the Minotaur. A few of his attacks focus on his giant battle axe, namely a quick step forward with it, as well as a large jump slash with it that sends him forward across about half the room's size. Otherwise, he can do an outright bull charge at you that you need to jump over, and doing so from the floor, as Richter is rough, if even possible. He can also rip some of the floor away and throw it at you in an arc to rain down upon you, or breathe out a toxic mist that outright petrifies you momentarily. What I can't quite tell, though, and Future Me, see if you can look into this, is if the petrification that he can inflict on you works like later games in the series where you can mash to get out of it faster. His pinch attack is to crumble the platforms in the room and just do a shoryuken towards the wall, and dodging that can be tight. This being a main exit boss, beating the Minotaur will also take you into main stage 4 from either place you can fight him. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 3 we're going to go tackle alternate stage 3 before starting off the stage 4s. See you guys then.